2 out of 3 isn't so bad on this bite-sized edition of the College Football Connection, week number 7, overtime edition for you. Bradford Brun's Marty Jenkins, our man Alvin Reed. Marty, he'll be back in a matter of days when we go all out with our week 8 predictions, being the prognosticators that we are. But you know that you and I, we had to convene this weekend because, wouldn't you guess it, just another frenetic, crazy, exhilarating college football Saturday movement all over in those polls.
I tell you what, I was texting a lot of people. I'm still fired up. You know, that Oregon-Ohio State game, I mean,
Tell me.
want to talk about, that's some of the best, first 15, 20 minutes of football I've ever seen. And, of course, it ended up being a great game. What a contest. I'm not going to throw this out here right now. I'm going to save it for a few minutes down the road here.
Okay.
But, I have a huge takeaway from that contest. Huge. And then you want to talk about the rest of the landscape. I mean, where do you begin? I can't wait for this upcoming Saturday. Because you know what this upcoming Saturday is, don't you, my man?
Oh, just a few marquee, high-profile showdowns. Just a few.
Just a couple no biggies. In,
just a few.
Knoxville and Athens.
Mm-hmm. Some interesting goings on, not only in the SEC, although you can be sure that we will get to that conference here as we are on the 101 ESPN YouTube channel and also 101ESPN.com. As always, appreciate everybody listening, especially for this bonus edition of the program. But, Marty, you touched upon it from the very beginning there, that OSU-Oregon showdown, those two programs, those schools meeting for the first time in the Big Ten, and Ryan Day and company had an opportunity on the road to really wreak some havoc, perhaps not overall in the CFP picture, because I think we'd be kidding ourselves if we were to stand here and say, at season's end, neither of these teams or one of these teams will not actually be there in the picture. However, it's a nip and tuck affair, as you would have anticipated, goes into the fourth quarter, and for me, as Oregon ultimately comes out with that 32-31 victory, the difference was at quarterback. And you know that I haven't exactly been as bullish as many people on Will Howard this season. He played well. The numbers all told were there. But at the same time, when the fourth quarter rolled in, that's when Gabriel really turned it up. The 27-yard keeper, he plunges into the end zone. He throws for more than 300 in 2 touchdowns. And then you have Howard sliding on 3rd and forever and ending the game. Mr. Day goes to 1-7 in games against top 5 teams overall.
1-7
all time.
Mr. Day criticized yet again for late game decisions, clock management, etc. Lincoln Riley, take notes. Not the first time this has transpired with Day. Hopefully it doesn't come up to bite them as we get a couple months down the road here, because
never know.
Well, let me get to Gabriel first. While he's not listening to Morgan Wallen, the southpaw is out there slinging perfect passes. How many perfect balls were thrown yesterday? It was absolutely unbelievable. I thought the last team that had the ball was going to win it, Bradford.
There you go.
Didn't end up being the case. This Oregon team, and I think it touches a lot on the landscape, as we'll talk about, Bama and Georgia momentarily, but it's like these kids, there's really no rhyme or reason to it. I think when they're playing a lesser opponent, they kind of just play down to them. But when the lights are on, like in Eugene last night at Autzen, look at what Oregon did. And they've had contests this year where you're like, it took you took you to the fourth quarter, to get that win against a lesser opponent. But yeah, Gabriel, unbelievable. I do think down the road, Oregon probably will be unblemished. But what a contest, man. It was absolutely unbelievable.
Lived up to the hype, and as a result, Oregon moves up to number 2 in the latest Associated Press top 25 rankings there. And for the Ducks, highest position since way back in 2014 after playing in the title game, although Texas, not surprisingly, hangs on to the number 1 spot as the Longhorns just absolutely demolished OU. Yeah. The first time that the Red River rivalry, that you have the 2 participants as SEC schools, but they were in different weight classes, to be sure. Quinn Ewers, he comes back, he throws for 199 in a score. He's not replicating what he did 2 years ago in that blowout triumph, but he didn't have to. And for me, it's pretty shocking when you consider that OU, the calling card, and I don't exactly think the Venables and company, they're great shakes this season in 2024. I was never overly optimistic about this squad entering the season.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're giving up 400 plus yards
Yeah.
and you are all about that side of the football, you're getting pushed around on both sides.
Yeah.
That's problematic.
And, you say different weight class. Some would say, different planets, myself included. But,
Just be kind,
listen, they had a couple of big injuries, OU, but it doesn't matter. That contest, Texas just manhandled them on both sides of the ball. OU, I think at the end of the season, they're probably staring at 4 or 5 losses. Very feasible.
Don't disagree.
And I love Texas. I love what they bring on both sides of the ball. But, ready for this, Bradford?
I want to hear it. Right now, give it to me.
I don't care that the Buckeyes lost. I still think they're on a different planet than the rest of college football.
Including
Yeah.
Hook'em Horns.
Yeah, including Hook'em Horns.
Is it the Jeremiah Smith factor? Is it the receiving core?
They are so fast on both sides of the ball.
Okay.
They are littered with NFL talent. Howard is going to be all right. He was fine yesterday, They're going to learn from that late game situation. I just think they're going to be hoisting the trophy at the end of the year. They're the best team I've seen all year. I don't care that they lost to the Ducks. That was in Autzen. If it was in Columbus, it'd probably be a different story. Of course, we looked at that point spread. It was going to be decided by a possession. But I still love them to hoist the trophy. And I think they're the best team in college football. Sorry, Steve, my buddy Steve Free, huge Horns fan. But I just think they're on another planet.
And I do love that backfield room considerably more than what UT has to afford right now, given all of the preseason and the fall camp injuries. They're moving along to, how about going out west? You know that if Alvin were here, he'd be all about this one because Penn State, moving up to number 3 for the first time in forever, heads out to USC. 2,500 miles of travel, first road trip in the newfangled Big Ten, right?
Yep.
Needing overtime, but ultimately prevailing 33-30, Marty, to move up to that number 3 spot effective today. And even though you look on the surface and you say, Drew Aller, yeah, he had almost 400 yards of passing in the tight end for crying out loud. I believe he matched an FBS record. Tyler Warren's 17 receptions.
17.
How do you do? But Penn State wins that game on the road in a game in which Aller had multiple picks too. How impressive.
Franklin's been criticized for not winning the huge one. He has yet to win the huge contest against, the top 5 team or whatever.
Right.
But this was a big-time win. They go down there. I picked USC to cover in that game, which, they did. But I thought USC would win outright. And it looked like at the beginning, Bradford, they came out the gate strong. But to go there, you mentioned all the highlights on offense. Their defense, one of the best in the country, didn't look like that this weekend.
Nope.
But that was still a big-time win going there, and that elevates them in the polls. But I still think Ohio State goes to Happy Valley in that whiteout, and they take care of them pretty handily. But at the end of the year, Penn State has one loss. Very interested to see where they fall in those polls down the road.
Speaking of plummeting, a couple of teams doing precisely that as we roll along for a couple of additional minutes. Week number 7, College Football Connection overtime. Bradford Bruns and Marty Jenkins. Yes, we're not entirely glossing over Mizzou absolutely annihilating UMass. We knew it would happen. We didn't exactly know the fashion in which it would occur. More on that in a matter of days. Illinois also 50-49 over Purdue. For crying out loud, for some reason, the Boilermakers have presented issues for Illinois over the last decade. It happened again.
And, we talked about this on the last YouTube a few days ago. I told everybody to take Purdue on the money line 10-1.
You did.
And it darn near looked like that was going to transpire.
Astute, as always.
Purdue, Illinois, well, not as always. But we are a few games over 500. We're doing good. 7 or 8 games over 500.
Yes, sir.
We're heading in the right direction. And we appreciate those views. But Purdue, Illinois, it just always seems like that's a close contest. And Purdue finally decided, to show up, and they played a good game. At the end of the day, though, Illinois got the dub, and they got a few more dubs on that schedule. They're going to have a great campaign this year, 8 or 9 wins.
Purdue, by no means a doormat on Saturday. Also, for that matter, we should note, Ole Miss wasn't either, but reverting to the previous point in SEC land, you know that I have been all about those LSU Tigers since before this season even started. And hey, another contest that just simply goes to an extra session there as well. LSU 29, Ole Miss 26. And Marty, when we were actually batting it around with the fast lane back on Friday on 101 ESPN, I identified this game for Lane Kiffin's squad, for Mr. Kelly's squad there in Baton Rouge. The game did, of course, unfold in Louisiana as, for all intents and purposes, a knockout, in my opinion, a knockout elimination game for college football playoff berth aspirations, because Ole Miss still has a litany of those upper echelon teams on the schedule. You're telling me you're going to rebound against an Alabama or a Georgia on the road? LSU, you know what's coming in the form of a Crimson Tide team. Yes, that has been tested, but it's still Alabama. Those two teams both needed that game desperately, and it was LSU getting it into overtime. And hey, I am admittedly all about the new DC in town. You understand that. I think Baker's unit is getting progressively better week in and week out. Really had Dart under duress for long stretches of that game. To wit, 6 sacks, constant pressure.
You know, it was a very nice win by them. They've been kind of lying in the weeds the last few weeks, you know, in terms of that opening we lost at the beginning of the season. But I forgot to look. They're at 8 now. Where were they at prior to that? Do you know how many spots they moved up by chance?
In the teens. Yeah, okay. Vaulted about 7 positions.
Yeah,
impressive.
Big win by them. And, you know, Lane Kiffin and company finally called out, finally having to make, a formal apology. Will, quote, do better going forward. Conduct themselves properly moving forward. 29 stoppages due to injury over the last 3 contests, I believe. Like, come on. That's just absolutely ridiculous. But if there's going to be a 2-loss team, talked about their schedule, it's going to be them. But I don't see that happening.
We'll see what transpires there. A couple of final thoughts on the SEC as we wind it down here. Alabama again pushed to the brink versus South Carolina. Probably could have succumbed in that game, 27-25, and then Georgia messes around well into the second half versus Mississippi State. Vaunted Mississippi State team with 1 win on the ledger this season, 0-3 in SEC. Georgia, I really don't know what we're watching right now, but in Athens to win that game by the meager sum of 10 points. And don't forget, final point here, Tennessee also gets extended to overtime and walks out with just a 6-point victory versus Florida. It's calamity.
It is calamity. It's been wacky across the board. And you mentioned, Georgia. Okay. I think a lot of this is, and with Bama as well, as we talked about at the get-go here, they're not getting up for these games. They really don't care about the lesser opponents, and it's been a few teams across the country in the first few weeks. But they'll get up this weekend. They'll beat Texas. And, it's just really, really bizarre. So I don't know what to make of it.
It's inexplicable in a lot of ways. You can be sure that we will have plenty of talk pertaining to Texas and Georgia and so many other high-profile showdowns. A little bit of love on the way out as well.
Perfect.
Speaking of teams that actually, as a matter of fact, are getting up for each and every tilt in the SEC, how about Vandy? Seriously.
Yep.
Because when you go to Kentucky, and mind you, yes, the Wildcats knocking off just a couple of weeks ago the same Ole Miss Rebels. Look out now for Pavia and company. Maybe not a Cinderella as much as a formidable group. And our service academies, Army and Navy.
Yep.
Marty, now ranked, both of those programs, for the first time this late in a season since 1945.
Let's also give some love. 1945?
45.
Let's also give, that was the year Alvin was born.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. Alvin, I love you, man.
Are we?
All right. Number 9, Iowa State. Cyclones.
Yes, sir.
6-0. You mentioned the service academies. BYU, number 13 in the country. Well, Army and Navy. But BYU, number 13 in the country, 6-0. Easy schedule going forward as well. Keep an eye on that. Pitt, undefeated. I'm from Indiana. The boys from Bloomington are 7-0. They could be 10-0 before heading to Ann Arbor.
Those Hoosiers not only will be featured in our installment here in a few days, we are going to look at them prominently, my friend. It's been too long. We have to do so. So we will get into Indiana. We will get into the local scene. Mizzou has Auburn for homecoming scheduled on Saturday as well. Can't wait to do so. Marty, awesome. Always to be able to talk with you here, even in the capacity of just a few minutes. Whole band gets back together in a few days.
And I love your Celtics swag. Of course, I'm a diehard Celtics fan. I did not jump on the Tatum bandwagon a few years ago. Always have been. Not that there's anything wrong with anybody jumping on the Tatum bandwagon. He's a local guy. Love it. Bradford, I love that you're repping it, and they are going to repeat this year, baby.
I love it. We'll have some conversation about that as well. Stay tuned to any number of different podcasts there. Marty Jenkins, Bradford Bruns with you on the 101 ESPN YouTube channel and 101ESPN.com. Thanks, as always, for tuning in, for listening, watching. We're back at you very, very soon.